What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. The draft is over. We are getting into post-draft rankings. Obviously, we're going to have some risers. We're going to have some fallers. We're coming at you today with our top 10 running back rankings. Over the next couple of days, we're going to come at you with all of our positional rankings. Tomorrow will be top 10 receivers, and then we'll have top fives of the quarterback and the running back or in the tight end position with some honorable mentions as well. Later in the week, we're going to come at you guys with some super flex mock draft, a one quarterback mock draft. And then over the weekend, we'll probably do a Dynasty decisions where you guys can get some of your questions answered, which direction you should go with some of your rookie picks based on your roster and stuff like that. And then we'll also probably close out the week with a live startup mock draft as well. If you guys enjoy any of the Dynasty content, any of the rookie content that we're putting out, I encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, and check out our draft guide over at fantasystockexchange.com. That was a lot of information. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Again, that quality content week coming at you. You better have those notifications on. You better be watching these videos because guess what? We got you covered. That being said, today's video, as Corey mentioned, running backs. Post-draft top 10 running backs. But we're going to hit the intro on you first. So as I mentioned, we're going to start off with number one amongst our consensus running backs and both of our number ones post-draft. That's going to be Najee Harris, newly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a top 4 rookie pick in Superflex drafts, according to us. So he's in that tier 1. He's with, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks another time, but he's with 3 other quarterbacks, and he's the 101 in one quarterback league. So this is a sure dynamite difference-making franchise type of pick for your teams in Dynasty. Let's talk about the player himself. He is the most scheme versatile back in this entire class and lands with the Steelers team that really, with their new identity, want to really develop into a zone blocking scheme for the 2020 season. It's been reported amongst several Steelers reporters that they want to embody that zone blocking scheme that they really made babies with in the mid-2010s with Le'Veon Bell as their main back. Now, you're mentioning Harris himself. He enters a Steelers team that has used that feature back when one has been available for as long as I can remember. I mentioned Le'Veon Bell in the mid-2010s. Even when James Conner was healthy in 2018, he was used in that regard. Just talking about the opportunity we should expect from a guy in Najee Harris. When Le'Veon Bell was in his prime and Le'Veon Bell was that team's identity, he was receiving 70 to 75% opportunity share in that backfield. If Najee gets anything close to that, he is going to be a bona fide superstar in fantasy football.
Yeah, and I think with Najee Harris, people are going to have concerns, right? Because obviously you mentioned and you referenced the Le'Veon Bell days, right? The glory days of Pittsburgh Steelers running backs. The offensive line isn't nearly as good as those days. Obviously, I believe they ranked like 32nd in yards created as an offensive line. So it definitely is a concern. It was good to see them address it at some point in the draft. I mean, the pick of Pat Freiermuth didn't exactly help with that, but the rest of the draft, they seem to address their offensive line. And obviously you have the other concerns with Big Ben potentially being on his last year with the team. You have a kind of an uncertain quarterback situation going forward. But the volume alone, this guy is going to get 300 touches, man. Like, he doesn't have like any remote competition in his backfield with Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. Like, plus on top of that, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, who historically is one of the best in the NFL, in NFL history, to be honest. So I trust them to be able to figure out their offensive line, be able to figure out their quarterback situation in a timely manner, because they've given me reason to believe that they can do that before.
Yeah, 100%. And the way Mike Tomlin glowed about this guy in the post-draft interview, he wants this to be their identity. He wanted to add that stable, secure franchise running back to really help Ben Roethlisberger on his last days. This is not the same Ben Roethlisberger we've seen multiple times in the past throw the ball 600, 650 times. This is a Ben Roethlisberger who, quite frankly, simply lacks that arm that he's been known for over the years. And we're talking about workload. He is the most safe, secure workload in this entire rookie class. For reference, James Conner, the fragile running back we all know him to be now, had 286 opportunities in 13 games in 2018. For reference, 22 per game. And now that's when he was coming in as mostly an unknown. That's when Le'Veon Bell sat out. Nobody really knew what James Conner was capable of. Guess what? Everybody knows what Najee Harris is capable of. So 22 opportunities I think that's his floor. Honestly, I can see this guy being legitimately a 20 touch per game franchise running back as soon as he walks onto that football field. So with that being said, if you have any pick inside that top 4, and let's just say you're not dying or desperate for a quarterback, Najee Harris, this is a guy who should be a top 8 to 10 running back as soon as he steps onto the field. And the ceiling, once they address that offensive line, could lead to many separate top 5 overall finishes at the position. I absolutely love this guy.
Yeah, I think it was Ian Hartitz tweeted out something about like how many players have received 300 touches over the last couple of years. I think only 3 running backs did it last year. And I believe they were the top 3 running backs in fantasy. So if he has a chance to reach the 300 touch threshold, which I believe he actually does as a rookie, then we're looking at a guy that can finish as a top 5 running back, even in a situation where the offensive line might not open up the biggest holes or anything for that. And for that matter, too, the Steelers' offensive line was bad in part because the running backs were bad also. Like a better running back will help the offensive line, just like a good offensive line can help a bad running back. It kind of goes both ways. So, yeah, with that being said, I think we can move on to the next running back. Najee Harris, for me, I had Travis Etienne as my RB1 before the draft actually happened. But I said if Najee Harris goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the workload is just so easy to project. It's such an easy fit. He's the exact same type of running back as Le'Veon Bell. Like, they should know how to use this guy. It's impossible for me to rank the guy anywhere other than RB1. And Travis Etienne is a guy that we're going to get into right now because he is our consensus RB2. I do like his landing spot. A lot of people don't like his landing spot, obviously, because of the James Robinson factor of it all. But when you look at the draft capital, you look at that first-round caliber draft capital, and on top of all that, he's a great scheme fit. From a schematic standpoint, when you're looking at Travis Etienne going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, a lot can be translated from what we said in the Matchmaker video about Trevor Lawrence going from Clemson to Jacksonville, because they obviously came from the same college offense going to the same NFL offense. In 2018, when Urban Meyer was last a college coach at Ohio State, Dwayne Haskins recorded 444 of his 583 dropbacks from 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, and only 6 dropbacks not from shotgun. He only had 21 dropbacks from 12 personnel, which was 2 tight ends. So basically what we're looking at, and this makes sense too with the addition of Marvin Jones in the offseason and the fact that they were potentially in on a guy like Kadarius Toney where they picked Etienne, you're looking at a heavy 11 personnel scheme, a lot of shotgun, not a lot of heavy personnel with 2 and 3 tight ends. We basically already talked about this, as I mentioned, with Trevor Lawrence's fit, but how they're going to deploy Trevor Lawrence and how they're going to deploy Travis Etienne is I'm imagining is going to be much the same that what they did with J.K. Dobbins and Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Again, you mentioned that the 11 personnel that we should be accustomed to seeing over there. That fits Etienne's skill set tremendously. You mentioned most of his runs were out of shotgun. Most of his runs were with 3 wide receiver sets. And not to mention, he has a quarterback joining him that played with him in college, understands the fit of Etienne in the offense. And with Urban Meyer, you mentioned that J.K. Dobbins and Dwayne Haskins kind of parallel. He's used to working with these younger players and letting them work out their fits, letting them work out their kinks, and really understanding how to best utilize these guys. So I fully agree. I mean, the people that want to tank Etienne, let him fall past the 108 in rookie drafts, it just makes no sense to me, because at the end of the day here, he's still a first-round capital running back with a great schematic fit, joining a teammate, and in general, by far the most talented running back in the country. I don't care that James Robinson had a good year last year. If you want to compare talent, Etienne is a far better running back than what James Robinson is. So I just have to get that off my chest, because all offseason people are like, oh, James Robinson, what a stud. They're not going to take a running back. Why would no, they invested the 25th overall pick in one because they realized Etienne is a step above what we saw from James Robinson. And I fully agree. Joining that offense, he is the number 2. So don't let him just fall. People are going to rank Michael Carter above him. I bet you it's going to happen.
Oh, I've already seen it. It's happened.
Sickening. But
so you already mentioned how he fits the scheme. Just to put some numbers in perspective, in 2019, Travis Etienne had the 9th most attempts in the country from 11 personnel, with the 2nd most yards in the country on the 9th most attempts at 8.3 yards per carry. So he can run from 11 personnel. He did it at Clemson. In 2019, I'm not making this up, he had 206 of his 207 rushing attempts from shotgun. That's literally every single one minus 1 carry. And again, I'm not making this up. In 2020, 167 of his 168 rushing attempts came from shotgun, which is, again, only 1 did not. So a lot of inside zone, a lot of draws from a shotgun alignment. Etienne is the guy. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This coaching staff did not find James Robinson as an undrafted free agent. Nor did this front office. This is an entirely new regime. And this is what happens with UDFAs. They get lost in the shuffle. And the first thing that Urban Meyer said when he watched Jacksonville's film, when he took over the job, was he wanted to add speed to that offense. And we can all agree that Travis Etienne definitely adds more speed than what James Robinson does. If Robinson's going to be involved, it's probably going to be in a limited fashion. He's probably going to spell him at some point. And people that are hearing, I don't know if like Etienne's going to be the feature passing game back, because I've heard people say this because some people had questions about Etienne's involvement. Well, we have the same quarterback that had Travis Etienne lead the country in receptions last year. So I think it's just a complete no-brainer that Travis Etienne is the RB2 in my opinion. I like Javonte Williams, and you're going to get into him in a second. But to me, the first-round draft capital, the fact that he's paired with his old quarterback, the fact that his old quarterback also pined for him to be drafted, and Jacksonville was willing to facilitate that, probably tells you that they're also going to be willing to invest in the offense around Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne in the future. So this is a guy, he's currently ranked as like my 105, 106, depending on if you have a quarterback need. He is a guy that I'm absolutely willing to take that high in a super flex draft. And in a one quarterback draft, he's more like my 103, 104.
Yeah, no, fully agree. You mentioned that real quick. I currently have that top 4 tier that I mentioned with Harris, with him being in it. Travis Etienne is in that second tier. You got a guy like Zach Wilson, you got a guy like Jamar Chase, and then we're going to get into Javonte Williams, Kyle Pitts, and other videos as well. Well, Javonte Williams in this video. Actually, let's just talk about Javonte Williams right now, because as I alluded to, he is currently my 106 and a 1 QB, and I would view him as a more so mid to back end first in the super flex as being our consensus RB3. Talk about the draft capital. He lands in the top 40 picks of the NFL draft with the 35th overall pick. The Denver Broncos selected him. And on the surface, this is it's kind of a similar situation to last year when Detroit took DeAndre Swift. Everybody at first was like, I don't know about the landing spot. Like, what's he going to do? They have Kerryon Johnson. Similar to this year, people are going to be like, oh, well, they have Melvin Gordon. Like, how's he going to do? No, honest to God, I think this is a very good spot for what he's got, because you look at the offense, at least average, I think above average offensive line. I think they're actually a top 10 unit according to PFF as an offensive line. So you got a good offensive line. You got a good offense that should be projected with the receiving core that they have, with the quarterback upgrade, and one of the better defenses in the league. So this is a team ready to win now, and they got a running back who can really chip in every single way. I'm going to mention their offense real quick. Denver ran a very versatile run scheme with Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon last year. And there was really no clear indications of true tendencies apart from heavy 11 personnel and a good mixture of counter slash trap type schemes for this team. Phillip Lindsay departs now, leaving for the Houston Texans the offseason, which vacates 132 opportunities in the 11 games he played. And given the capital we just saw Denver invest in Williams,
they traded up too, ahead of Miami to make sure
exactly. Given that they traded up, they used a high pick on him. You can pretty much ink right now that at least 132 opportunities in 11 games, if you actually equate that, that's about 12.5 per game, will be going to Javonte Williams. And when you actually look at it, that's just year one. The main attraction of Javonte Williams is that he is such a complete pack and completely fits what Denver wants to do, as I mentioned, with their scheme. He does a bit of everything. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, can run an outside zone, he can run in between the tackles, super elusive in space. He's a very good fit for what Denver wants to do with Pat Shurmur running this system. Not to mention, year one, he should be okay. Maybe a late surge at the end of the year, similar to what we saw with Cam Akers. But year two, Melvin Gordon is a free agent after this year. By selecting Javonte Williams and trading up for Javonte Williams, do we really think he's going to be brought back at this point?
No, and when you're talking about an appreciation of like value type of situation, right? Because if you're taking Javonte Williams, let's say you got the 108, your super flex draft, and you take Javonte Williams with that pick, this dude is going to be a top 3-round startup pick next year. With Melvin Gordon, even if he doesn't show that much, he'll still probably go that high, because with Melvin Gordon going as a UFA, he's completely just off the books next year. This is a guy that is going to absorb all of Melvin Gordon's carries. And we're probably going to see at some point this year, Melvin Gordon's an injury-prone player. We might even see it earlier than we think. Javonte Williams is eventually going to see what we saw with Cam Akers, with DeAndre Swift, with J.K. Dobbins this past year, where he slowly starts to take over that backfield. And then it's wheels up the next year with all these second-year backs that we're looking at now.
I think Javonte Williams is the perfect stash back at this point. You mentioned we're currently doing our Dynasty draft with the listeners. He went at the 503. I think a year from now, we're going to be looking at Javonte Williams 503 and thinking, how the heck did we let him fall that far? Honestly, because you're looking at it. Melvin Gordon this year alone, in the 15 games he played, had 259 opportunities for Denver. Not to mention, we're not even talking about the fact Denver is going to be in the quarterback market next year. Denver may take a Sam Howell, a Kadon Slovis.
They might trade for Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers.
Right? So you're looking at this offense next year, we talk about quarterback nest all the time. They have all these weapons, all these pieces. Once they add this quarterback, and they got Javonte Williams leading an offense that should be able to put up points basically at will, Javonte Williams, I could see being a top 10 to 12 dynasty running back this time next year based off the situation. So take the risk on him. If he's there in the middle to late first round of your Superflex drafts, stash him up, especially if you don't have an immediate need this year. He is going to explode next year and on. But that being said,
perfect rebuild pick. If you're in a startup draft like you're currently doing right now in our startup draft, if you're looking for like a year 2, year 3 type of window of winning, this is the perfect pick to take. And if you're in a rookie draft, maybe you're not going to win this year. Again, perfect type of player to pick, because I think if nothing else, his value is going to go up like crazy next year. Whether it actually like he explodes in his second year or not, his value will be very high next year. So he's a guy that I absolutely think is worth a mid first round pick. And he's a guy that I think you mentioned it already. Like the top 3 running backs did not change for us. They're the exact same top 3 that we had. The only thing that changed for me was the fact that Etienne's now my running back 2 instead of my running back 1. But as a consensus, we didn't change on that at all. Another thing that we didn't change on, I didn't change on, I don't think you changed on this either, is that Michael Carter's our RB4. Because Michael Carter, I mean, a lot of people had a guy like Kenneth Gainwell, potentially RB4, maybe Trey Sermon pre-draft. We both had Michael Carter as our RB4 pre-draft, and I think a lot of people have caught up post-draft that Michael Carter is RB4 as well. He is currently my 15th overall player in terms of my overall Superflex ranking, so an early second-round pick in Superflex drafts, and he's probably about a late first in a one-quarterback format. Carter basically goes off the board in the NFL draft later than both of us, I think, anticipated, with the 107th pick as an early 4th rounder. The interesting thing to note about this pick, though, is that the Jets traded away both their 3rd rounders. They had 2 3rd-round picks. I think it was like 66 and like 80-something. And they used those 3rd rounders to move up in round 1 to select USC offensive lineman Elijah Vera-Tucker. So Carter may have been a guy that they would have taken in the 3rd round if they had both of those picks available. And I think by listening to Robert Saleh's press conference, it sounds like they would have picked him there, because it sounds like they were surprised he was there in the 4th round.
You're going to feature with a wide zone run scheme.
Yeah, Michael's got tremendous vision. He's got tremendous speed, burst. He's got the ability to make people miss. He's good on 3rd down, coming out of the backfield in the pass game, and he's pretty stout in protection. So for him to be where he was at 107 was a major surprise to all of us, including Joe and his staff. I mean, felt like it was a no-brainer at that point. When we went to bed last night already knowing that was going to be the guy. I mean, he's an incredible talent, so we're excited to have him.
And when you're talking about a schematic standpoint, right, Michael Carter is just a perfect fit for this scheme. We know that Mike LaFleur is going to come in and implement a simplistic but effective running scheme that consists of mostly inside and outside zone, which Carter actually ran 72 of his 156 rushing attempts from at UNC last year. So nearly half of his attempts last year came on both inside and outside zone plays, which is primarily what the Jets are going to run with LaFleur coming in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're mentioning the zone scheme that he's going to be running. You got a guy in Zach Wilson coming in. You got an offensive line. You mentioned Elijah Vera-Tucker coming in. The Jets are building this team the right way. They take their quarterback. They built the offensive line, including Mekhi Becton last year. They have a coach who's willing to adapt and learn around their young players. You wait, and you still get a running back as talented as Carter in the 4th round. And I applaud the Jets for this offseason. I was really skeptical of them coming into the offseason. Every move that they have made, Joe Douglas, I commend you, has indicated that they are on the right path to including. And it
all started with the Adams trade, right? Because they still have 2 ones next year. If they still need, like, let's say this year they go in and they like have a disastrous right tackle situation or something like that, or they need like a number 1 receiver next year or something, they have the capital next year to be able to add more pieces to their offense and to their defense as well if they need like a corner or something next year. So I think from a team building perspective, they got some of their foundational pieces in this draft, right? And that's what you're looking for when you're investing in someone in Dynasty is the offense, is the franchise going in the right direction? And I think you can argue that the Jets absolutely did that with getting what they presume to be their franchise quarterback, a great offensive line piece, probably going to play beside Mekhi Becton, should lock down the left side of their offensive line. They already had some pieces on offense that showed some promise as well, and then they went out and got Corey Davis in free agency. This is a team that's on the come up, and I think with Michael Carter, the really intriguing thing from his fantasy perspective is the lack of competition in that backfield, especially when you're talking about who's going to contribute as a receiver, because you have LaMichael Pirine currently slated as the starter. You have Tevin Coleman, you have Ty Johnson. All of these guys, Carter is severely more talented than all of them for starters, but the guy that left, who was the primary back last year, was Frank Gore. He vacates 187 rushing attempts and 19 targets from that backfield. That's going to be filled by somebody, whether it's Carter or not. Carter is by far the most talented back in that backfield and should be able to establish himself. The one thing I will caution some people is don't get carried away with Michael Carter. Like I said, we shouldn't be ranking this guy over Travis Etienne. We shouldn't be ranking this guy over Javonte Williams. And the reason is because he's a 4th-round pick for a team that has a lot of draft capital coming up, right? They could, if he doesn't, let's say Michael Carter comes in this season, he's not quite able to establish himself as a starter right away. Maybe it takes him about half the season. What's stopping the Jets from drafting Breece Hall with their second first-round pick next year? Or maybe in the second round, or maybe like some of these other running backs are going to be in the draft next year. They use like an early second rounder on them. So that's the only thing I would caution you with Michael Carter is don't look at this guy as a 4-year starter, because it is very much a year-over-year thing with him. Just because he's a talented back doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be a feature part of their offense year in and year out, no matter what.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. He has a good situation. He has good potential to be able to fill that volume role. But because of the uncertainty about the draft capital, about the overall commitment to him past this year, there is no sensible reason to rank him over any of the top 3 running backs, quite frankly. You mentioned they took Michael Carter because he fell to them. Sorry. For comparison, the Steelers took Najee Harris. They didn't need to take him at 24. They took him because he fits exactly what they need. Same thing with Etienne to the Jaguars. They took him because they had Trevor Lawrence. They already had a running back in place. They don't care. They took Etienne because they envisioned him as being an integral part of the offense. And then the Broncos traded up past Miami to make sure they have Javonte Williams. There is no type of commitment even eerily similar to that in a 4th-round selection. I get it. They could have used a 3rd-round pick on him if they had one, and I do think his talent would be symbolic more so of a 2nd-rounder as opposed to the 4th-rounder that they used. But we have to keep this in mind. 4th round, if anything goes wrong this year, if he gets hurt, if he has a run-in, like let's just say hypothetically, I don't know, like a DUI, anything like that, this team can cut bait with him in a second. If he was a 1st, 2nd, 3rd-round pick, a lot less likely that happens. So with that being said, he is the consensus 4 for us, and a clear 4. But don't get carried away. Don't rank him over the top 3. That is just ludicrous.
Yeah, and there is a bit of a tier break between him and his former teammate in Javonte Williams, right? Like this, I see Carter as more of an early 2nd-rounder, where I think Javonte is locked in top 10 pick for me in a super flex format. So that's a pretty big value discrepancy in my opinion. If you were to trade someone like for the 109 compared like trying to get Javonte Williams as compared to the 203, it's a lot bigger than it sounds in my opinion with these 2 running backs available, because let's be honest, this class is terrible, and we're going to see why in a second, because this list goes off a freaking cliff after Michael Carter, in my opinion, including the number 5 guy that we're going to get into in a second.
I'm just going to quickly mention a little sidebar, a little side note. Guys, stop valuing picks based off their number. Start valuing them based off the player you can assign to them. People will look at a trade, for example, and automatically say, oh, this guy absolutely ripped off. When you actually look at the players assigned and you realize, oh, this is the last guy of the tier and there's a big fall off after him, that pick is going to increase in value. So I don't understand people that just look at a deal based off the numbers and think, oh, yeah, no, that's a bad deal because that's a bad number. No. Assign the player and then evaluate, okay, post-draft, what would this be worth? Oh, this player would be worth this? Okay, that's what should be offered during the draft. That being said, little tangent. Grinds my gears all the time when people do that, but I'm going to start off with the number 5, and that's going to be Trey Sermon from the San Francisco 49ers. So he profiles as that early down banger for a team that's San Francisco who loves to have a full committee of running backs that really are strong in different departments. You mentioned the outside zone speed of a guy like Raheem Mostert. You mentioned Jeff Wilson's goal line ability. We have a guy now in Trey Sermon who can profile as that early 1 to 2 down banger who could really set the tone for their offense. Had to say that. But because they traded up in the 3rd round to go and get him, it just indicates to me that they do have a plan for him. And I do think that plan will be that 10 to 12 carry per game guy, similar to what we saw Carlos Hyde was for the San Francisco 49ers a few years ago as that kind of tone setter banger. However, people need to chill. I've seen people ranking him as like a late 1st, early 2nd round pick simply because he's a San Francisco 49er and because he got the draft capital. Are we not just forgetting that he's in one of the most confusing committees in the entire league and playing with quite literally a zillion other backs? I respect the draft capital, but Kyle Shanahan has showed multiple times he doesn't care how much he spent on you. He doesn't care how high he drafted you. He will play the back at a certain point that gives him his best overall output. We saw even last year, a couple years ago, Jerick McKinnon was signed to a $5-6 million a year.
Yeah, it was like top 5 for the position.
And Kyle Shanahan had no problem going on to the next guy once Jerick McKinnon got hurt. And even when he returned, was not slated to be the guy. So overall, if you want to take him in that mid to late 2nd range, okay, I can probably get behind that simply because of the draft capital. But people who try to convince themselves, oh, he's with Shanahan, he's a late 1st, early 2nd. No, do not do it. Do not be that sheep in your draft who just takes him because he's with Shanahan and he got high capital. Don't do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think, especially with Trey Sermon, people are going to convince themselves, right? They're going to be like, oh, well, Kyle Shanahan's run scheme is different, right? Like he's going to be, and this is a great landing spot for Trey Sermon. Like let's call it spade a spade. It's a great landing spot. But when we talk about a fantasy perspective, we got to stop looking at Kyle Shanahan's backfield with fantasy goggles because that's not how he looks at it. He looks at it like, okay, so we're on it's 3rd and 2. Who's my banger? I'm putting him on the field. Oh, we're on the goal line. Who's my goal line back? I'm putting him on the field. It's 3rd and 10 and I need my receiving back on the field. Who's on he just uses his running backs the way that the situation calls for. And Trey Sermon is just going to be another guy in that backfield. Maybe he's the most important guy from a fantasy perspective, but even that, what is that worth? An RB2? Like a back end RB2 in a redraft league and from a dynasty perspective, you're never going to see a top 5 ceiling from a San Francisco 49ers running back. It's just not going to happen because that's the way Kyle Shanahan works. And the only way that would happen is if every single running back in that backfield got hurt and he was the only guy. Like that's the only way that would happen.
Literally. And
yeah. With Trey Sermon, he's definitely the 5th best running back in this class based on now we know where the draft capital is and where he landed. But I see, again, another tier break between him and Michael Carter. I think with Michael Carter, you're looking at an early 2nd round guy. With Trey Sermon, it's more of a mid to late 2nd round guy. And then we're going to get into our RB6 in a second. I think it's an even bigger drop-off from Trey Sermon to the next guy because, quite frankly, the rest of the running backs got absolutely horrid landing spots in draft capital.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. So with that being said, talk about our Canadian lad and Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, so our RB6 consensus-wise is Chuba Hubbard. It's an absolutely shitty spot for Chuba Hubbard behind perhaps the biggest workhorse in fantasy football in Christian McCaffrey. Hubbard is basically just the Mike Davis replacement. That's the way I'm looking at him. That's the way you should look at him. Don't convince yourself that he's somehow going to carve out a role and eat into CMC's work. It's not going to happen. There's a significant, and I mean a significant drop in my rookie rankings from Trey Sermon, who's my RB5, to Chuba Hubbard, Elijah Mitchell, a couple other guys that are my RB6 and 7 and stuff like that. Sermon is a mid to late 2nd rounder, as we mentioned. Mitchell, Hubbard, we're talking mid to late 3rd round now. Like there's a gaggle of receivers, tight ends, even freaking quarterbacks that might go ahead of a guy like Chuba Hubbard for my rookie drafts and my rankings. So Hubbard is a great pick. If you have Christian McCaffrey, he's definitely the direct handcuff in my opinion, but that's basically all you're looking at, right? Like he's pretty much capped as a handcuff, and maybe he gets 3-4 games in his rookie season to slot in for CMC if he has like a high ankle sprain or something like that. But that's really all you're looking at. Unless Christian McCaffrey tears his ACL, that's the only way that Chuba Hubbard's going to be some league winner type.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, it sucks because I did think that he could profile as a really solid back if he landed in a situation where he would get opportunity. However, you mentioned if CMC is healthy, I don't care, Chuba Hubbard. You're not getting opportunity. It's just not happening. Could he fill in if CMC gets hurt, as you mentioned, and be that 16, 18 touch per game back that we saw Mike Davis do? Absolutely. But the thing is, unless CMC is off the field, which when he's actually healthy is 2% of the time, Like, you're not getting opportunity. I'm sorry, Chuba Hubbard, you're number 6, but let's be honest here. I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole if your ADP even crept up to close to the second round.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree.
With that being said, we'll go on to the next guy. And I mentioned Trey Sermon for the San Francisco 49ers. He's actually one of 2 backs that they took in this draft, the other one being Elijah Mitchell. And it's the same thing with Sermon, only with much less draft capital, being a 6th-round pick. So you mentioned the situation of Trey Sermon, a lot of running backs with Kyle Shanahan there. Elijah Mitchell's the same thing, except you're getting a 3-round discount in draft capital, which, as we mentioned with Michael Carter, is even less job security. So, however, though, I do respect the draft capital, which is why I have Sermon higher. However, I do think that Mitchell's package of size and speed is a lot more ideal for what the 49ers do with their wide zone scheme. Sorry, I almost said wide scheme zone, but you get it. Wide zone scheme. And this could really be a similar situation to what we saw with the Green Bay Packers in 2017 when Jamal Williams was a 3rd-round pick for them, and they ended up getting Aaron Jones later in the draft. It's kind of similar to what Sermon does versus Mitchell, and then what Williams does versus Jones. You got the big, more physical 2-down bruiser between the tackles with Sermon and Williams, and the more wide zone, get him on the edge, let him fucking do business with Aaron Jones and Elijah Mitchell. So if I have the choice of spending a mid to late 3rd on Mitchell versus a mid to late 2nd on Sermon, I'm going to do it on Mitchell any day of the week.
Yeah, and I think when you say mid to late 2nd on Sermon, there's no way he's actually going to go that low. That's the thing, too, is that we're saying that's where his value is. I'm willing to bet you that he is a top 15 pick, almost consensus-wise, in all rookie drafts in Superflex. With Trey Sermon, he's probably going to go in the top 15. I'm absolutely fading him for Elijah Mitchell, not because I think Elijah Mitchell's going to beat him out and be the starter and Trey Sermon's going to be thrown to the wayside. No, like, I respect the draft capital. He was a 3rd-round pick that traded up for him. From a talent perspective, I had a higher grade on Elijah Mitchell than I had on Trey Sermon. So at a round and a half discount in rookie drafts, absolutely I'll take Elijah Mitchell over Trey Sermon. So, yeah, I share that sentiment with you as well. He's actually my RB6 over Chuba Hubbard. I have Sermon and Mitchell back-to-back in my rankings, although it is a pretty decent tier gap, as I mentioned.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That being said, we can talk about Twitter's love in Kenny Gainwell and why he absolutely ballooned down these rankings. I believe pre-draft he was, our RB5?
Yeah.
And now he's 8?
Yeah.
So take it away.
Yeah, so when we're talking, I didn't mention, if we're talking about a riser, Trey Sermon was definitely a riser. I think he was like our RB9 or something like that, or RB8 in our pre-draft rankings, whereas we got him as RB5 now. So the biggest faller, in my opinion, was Kenny Gainwell. I think personally it's over for the Kenny Gainwell truthers. I know a lot of them thought that he was better than Travis Etienne, and the NFL told us that Kenny Gainwell is not better than Travis Etienne because the NFL took Travis Etienne in the 1st round. And Kenny Gainwell fell to the 5th round. And I know my team personally, you heard me on the live stream, I wanted Kenny Gainwell so bad. I was like, Tampa needs to take Kenny Gainwell. I told them to take him at 64 in the 2nd round. And then when he was there in the 3rd round, I'm like, please take Kenny Gainwell. And they didn't take him again. And then he was there in the 4th round. I'm like, please take Kenny Gainwell. And they didn't take him. So the NFL is clearly lower on this guy. What I'm currently estimating with Gainwell's role in this Philadelphia Eagles offense is the Boston Scott role. He's going to replace Boston Scott. He's going to be the Nyheim Hines type role of the Colts scheme that Nick Sirianni will be bringing in. That this probably, if anything, just hurts Sanders more than any other move that could happen in this backfield. I think this doesn't really do anything for Kenny Gainwell aside from completely tank his value and Sanders along with him. He just basically sandbagged everybody in that backfield. The 5th round draft capital is an absolute backbreaker in my opinion. The best case scenario that you're getting out of a guy like Kenny Gainwell is Tariq Cohen, Nyheim Hines, maybe he's a little bit of handcuff value, which is probably only valued around a late 3rd round rookie pick at best, because we got to remember Jordan Howard's still in this backfield too. Like, this could be a complete mess where Miles Sanders owners are pissed off, Kenny Gainwell owners are pissed off, and Jordan Howard's vulturing half the freaking goal line mark. Like, this could be a complete mess.
And then we would say Jordan Howard owners, but how many of those actually exist?
No, nobody would actually draft Jordan Howard, but he'd be enough to piss off everybody else.
Yeah, and you mentioned a Nyheim Hines role. Only we got Phillip Rivers versus Jalen Hurts at quarterback.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers, who literally can't walk to his fucking front door, versus Jalen Hurts, who's probably the 3rd most mobile quarterback in the league. So, yeah.
Yeah. How much pass catching work are we seriously expecting for Kenny Gainwell with a mobile quarterback, right? Like, to me, he's kind of roster clutter, in my opinion. Like, I just don't think he's going to be much of anything from a fantasy perspective. It sucks. I wish he would have went to Tampa Bay because he probably would have been a lot more valuable there. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. As a fifth rounder, it's very tough to have anything more than a complimentary role for the duration of your rookie contract, which is basically about the length of fantasy relevance I expect for Kenny Gainwell.
Yep, fully agree. With that being said, we'll go on to our consensus 9. Actually, my 7 versus your 11. The only reason I have him at 7 is because of where he went. And that's going to be Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Listen, he is not the 7th most talented running back in this class. Again, I mentioned with Phillip Rivers not being able to run to his front door. I bet you Rhamondre Stevenson would probably run there not much faster, in all honesty. Rhamondre Stevenson is that classic plotter. But guess what? New England doesn't care if you're fast. New England cares if you fit their scheme. And I very well think Bill Belichick is looking at Rhamondre Stevenson as his LeGarrette Blount level type replacement in that early down role and goal line work. You mentioned it. He was a 4th round pick. 4th round pick for a team that had guys like Damon Harris, Sony Michel, James White. They each have guys that fit a role in their offense. If Bill Belichick is taking you in the 4th round as a running back, which quite frankly, New England is the team that probably values, only team that could really say they value running backs less than freaking San Francisco, it should tell you something. And what it tells me is we've seen LeGarrette Blount, we've seen freaking Jonas Gray, we've seen freaking Mike Gillislee. They love that tone setter to establish the run on 1st and 2nd down. And I can see him developing into that 10 to 12 carry per game type back who just takes all the dirty work. And in this class, with how bad it is, I'm sorry, that's RB7. It's work. It's work. He could be an RB3 for you. On all honesty, he could be an RB3 in fantasy football. I can definitely see that for him, even behind Damon Harris.
Exactly. And that's why we're like, we sound a little angry right now. It's because we are. Like, this running back class had more potential than we were giving it, probably. Like, we probably overestimated it a little bit. But at the same time, like, the landing spots in the draft capital didn't do them any favors. So if we sound a little upset right now, it's because we had better expectations for this running back class. So
the fact that
sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, the fact that I have to rank Rhamondre Stevenson at 7 and I'm this upset about it should tell you how bad everybody else's landing spots basically were.
Yeah, and what this tells me, obviously, about Rhamondre Stevenson is Sony Michel is going to probably be a free agent after this year. They're not going to pick up his 5th-year option.
No.
And you got James White, who's only there for 1 year. They're just adding bodies to the backfield, right? Because Rhamondre Stevenson, much like Damian Harris in his rookie year, probably won't have a big role. But in 2022, when Sony Michel is no longer on the team, then he's probably going to have more of a complimentary role, maybe to Damian Harris, maybe to an all-new running back that they add. Who the hell knows with the New England Patriots? But nonetheless, again, roster clutter. That's the way I look at Rhamondre Stevenson. Probably just roster clutter. If anything happens to Damian Harris, he might have some value. But again, like we're talking about a team that's never going to give one guy the full workload. So even if Damian Harris were to get hurt, I honestly think it goes to Sony Michel then. The workload, and then after that it goes to Rhamondre Stevenson. So just a completely disgusting situation all around. Our RB10 consensus wise is Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert's a guy that you guys know I was very high on relative to consensus, and was a guy that was in the sleepers video that I put out. 6th round draft capital absolutely hurts my soul. I thought he would go in the 3rd, 4th round. I like the way that Herbert fits in the offense that he landed in. He went to the Chicago Bears, by the way. He profiles more of a change of pace guy. Will probably need an injury, though, to David Montgomery or Tariq Cohen to get on the field as a rookie. But Tariq Cohen is probably a major cap casualty after this season. He got a big contract that he absolutely did not deserve. And Herbert has shown flashes as a receiving threat. So I'm going to trust the Bears coaching staff that maybe that's what they see in him. And they're going to use him potentially in a Tariq Cohen complementary role to David Montgomery once Tariq Cohen is cut, which is probably going to be after this season. He was my RB8 pre-draft, so I'm still basically just betting on the talent that I saw. And eventually maybe it can show through, but this is a complete dart throw, like nothing more than a 4th round rookie pick for Khalil Herbert, because he's probably also just a handcuff / roster clutter.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, right now he should profile as that third running back, maybe 2nd type receiving back in that offense. But at the end of the day here, like, he's a 4th round pick. We're talking about literally a top 10 running back in this class is a 4th round rookie pick. That should tell you how
probably too.
Yeah, that should tell you how far it fell off based off the landing spots. That being said, we're going to mention one honorable mention between us that we both kind of like and both can see a role for, and that's going to be Chris Evans of the Cincinnati Bengals. We mentioned all offseason, though, Gio Bernard got released. They're going to find somebody to replace that role. Joe Mixon is just not going to take on 70 targets because Twitter wants him to. No, they brought in Chris Evans because they like his third down ability. They like his receiving ability. And while he's very raw and quite an older prospect, he profiles as that scat back to really fill the role of Gio Bernard. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got the smooth ability in the open field. And they spent decent capital on him. I believe they spent, what, a 5th-round pick on him?
I think it was a 6th-round pick. Or
5th or 6th-round pick. Regardless, it's not great draft capital, but it's enough to see that they're not just going to roll into the season with Joe Mixon. They're going to have at least somebody who can take touches away. And I think most of those touches that Chris Evans is going to garner is going to be in the receiving game. So absolutely worth a dart throw if you want to spend one in like the 4th round. Like I'm fine with spending one on Chris Evans there because quite frankly, this running back class is that bad.
Yeah. And there's a good chance that somebody gets cut in training camp and the Bengals add him and he just takes over the Gio Bernard role, whether it's like, I don't even know off the top of my head, maybe like they add like Rex Burkhead to their backfield or something like that. But like either way, there's going to be somebody that's added to that backfield. I just don't anticipate them going into the season with Joe Mixon and Joe Mixon only, especially with what happened to Joe Mixon last year. They're like, oh, you weren't able to stay healthy for a full season? Let's just give you a full workload and have no competition for you. Like, no, that's just not how that's how fantasy players think. That's not how coaching staffs think. They're not just going to go into to this season with just Joe Mixon in that backfield in a critical year for their quarterback's development. They're going to need some kind of complementary piece. And Chris Evans might be that guy if he's able to impress them in training camp. And we all know, if you know anything about Chris Evans, I mentioned him in the Sleepers video as well as an honorable mention. He's a freak athlete. He's a bit of an older prospect, but he's a freak athlete. So if he's able to impress them in training camp, then he might be able to carve out a Gio Bernard-like role. Yeah,
fully agree. So with that being said, hope you guys made it this far in the video. That being said, we will see you back for quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends to be released this week in a jam-packed content week for y'all. See ya.
Wire me the money.